Welcome to the GreenPilled Network podcast. If you're just joining us, we are building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers focused on using crypto to bring positive digital systems to the world. This podcast features the people who are doing it and is published every Tuesday and Thursday. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website at greenpilled.network, where you can download the GreenPilled book for free, join the Discord, and become a member of your local GreenPilled.network chapter. Today, we have a special episode that was taped at the General Forum on Ethereum Localism, which was put on by PDX DAO in Portland, Oregon, United States. So basically, PDX DAO, the Portland Localism DAO, put on a forum on Ethereum Localism, which is all about regeneration at the local level. On Friday, the 13th of October, 2023, I attended this gathering and had a lot of fun in the container that the PDX DAO created. The intention of the forum on Ethereum Localism was to create a container where the Ethereum community can elaborate for itself in a plurality of directions what experimentalism in the city can look like for Web3. So one of the themes I've been thinking about in GreenPilled V2 is how do we move from theory to action? How do we move into local spaces and use crypto to bottoms up regenerate local spaces? And so this was a timely event for me to attend this Portland event on Ethereum Localism because it means I got to meet lots of different speakers who are speaking on things like mutualism or what is called CoFi, collaborative finance, which I'd say is like an offshoot or another lens on what regenerative financial systems are. So talked a lot at the event about experiments in blockchain localism, community farms, forests, how local regeneration can happen, cosmolocal coordination, things of that nature. So I may do a couple episodes of what I learned at the Portland event if this episode goes well. This episode is a panel that I moderated on regenerative financial systems. So the first voice that you're going to hear when we play the audio back is going to be one of the organizers of the event. And then the second voice that you'll hear is me moderating the panel. It was quite an interesting panel that featured many different members of the Portland community. You'll hear them introduce themselves as they come on the stage and just talk about regenerative financial systems and what they mean to them. So it was an interesting conversation that got moving and created sort of a whirlwind of energy around regen or CoFi, which is called collaborative finance. And I think you're going to enjoy the discussion.
ValleyDAO is an open global collective working to finance and democratize the governance of synthetic biology technologies to protect the future of our planet. Research and progress into synthetic biology is critically constrained by the world of nation-state regulations and bureaucracy from middlemen. But the potential that synthetic biology has for the world is massive. It can produce a world in total harmony with nature. We can grow stuff using cells like software. It's awesome. And the best part is we no longer have to pull carbon out of the ground to grow and maintain civilization. Don't you think we should be funding this? ValleyDAO does, and that's what they're here to do, to try and make the SolarPunk world of tomorrow a reality today. So join ValleyDAO right now and save the planet at valleydao.bio.
Yeah, 4 panelists, and if everyone could welcome Kevin Iwaki back to stage after spinning up our QF round yesterday. Generously agreed to also be the Socratic dialogue leader in residence for the panel that we have. We'll be in discussion about regenerative financial systems. And it sounds like we're going to have a regenerative fishbowl element, TBD. Here we go.
Yeah, it was proposed that we do this as a fishbowl. So for the first 30 minutes, we'll just hang out and have a normal panel. But then after that, Kevin will give a signal of some sort. He'll make that up on the go. And then at that point, if anybody in the audience feels like they have something to share, there will be an empty chair here for you to come up to. So there'll be a signal. And if anybody wants to come up and join the panel, then you can. And we'll just kind of keep rotating through. Yeah.
Sounds great. The first half hour of this panel will just be us discussing, and then we'll move to the fishbowl format. So the subject of the panel is regenerative finance, and the 5 of us are going to try to take you through a view of what is regenerative finance and what are we excited in that space. So I'm very excited to facilitate the discussion. Maybe we can kick it off with brief intros, 30 seconds or less from each of you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Giulio. I already introduced myself. I work on Crypto Commons Association, Commons Hub. We're going to launch a Commons Economy roadmap. Sociologist by background, into blockchain since 4 or 5 years. Very Marxist. That's it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vengi. I started in the space mostly as a designer, full stack designer, UX, UI, in mechanism. And helped start a bunch of DAOs, got really into the DAO, and then Moloch DAO, helped start Moloch DAO, Raid Guild, Metacartel, DAO House, many DAOs over the years. And today, mostly more focused on the philosophy side of decentralized coordination.
Yeah, I'm Felix. I'm a co-founder of the Crypto Commons Association and the Commons Hub. Also, doing my PhD in political science on narratives around commons-centric protocols and mechanisms in Web3. So how do communities speak about what they do, how they make sense for themselves, and how do they speak about it towards the outside?
I'm Jeff. I think I've met a bunch of you here now. I do a lot of my work with block science, doing sort of computational model of complex systems, helping the people who do that. I try to translate what they're doing into language for other people to understand the value of these tools. My entry into the space was through the Common Stack, which was in theory a toolkit of composable modules for commenting, fundraising, decision-making, dynamic preference allocation, that kind of stuff. Also a big mushroom geek, if you haven't noticed yet. I find these really interesting signal processing mechanisms. They're some of the oldest evolutionary algorithms on the planet. They're constantly at the edge of ecological succession and huge transitions, geological shifts. And I think we can learn from them and use these new substrates of design for better, more responsive, adaptive systems at every scale. So I'm really excited to be here and chatting about all these ideas with you guys.
What is regenerative finance to each of you? Is regenerative finance even the right aperture for what it is that we're doing here? Why and why not? Maybe aim for like 90 seconds or less from each panelist. Go ahead.
It's not fair that I am the first. It's a very bad position. Can we swap during the... So it's more difficult question than it seems, because in the crypto space now, regenerative finance is the intersection of crypto and climate. So the crypto protocols that are trying to address climate collapse. So how do we build a more regenerative economy with the right incentives so that we match economic value and ecological value, instead of now in which these two things are completely in the opposite direction. For me, for us at Commons Hub, we have a more broader perspective, meaning that regeneration is not only about the climate, but also about the social dimension. And even, it doesn't make sense to say that one is more important than the other, but yeah, they are both equally important. So for us, calling it crypto commons or collaborative finance or refi, it's the same class of actions to regenerate the planet and then to create a new economy which is regenerative itself, and so like restore, regenerate, democratize, socialism.
Yeah, thanks, Giulio. Same though. I think like the first thing that comes to mind for me, like why would I even think about or care about regenerative finance is, how can we make the entire idea and system of finance more reciprocal to its environment and part of the ecology, more responsive ecological value. One of the I was in Croatia recently, and someone called our current system the single token system, and I thought that was very salient. In that, we all kind of, no matter what that token is, although for most of it's USD, even not in this country, but across the world. So I think there's a significant radicalism required in rethinking the entire concept of finance and money, shared finance, in a way that works more cybernetically sound, philosophically sound with the biosphere.
So to me, regenerative financial systems, as Giulio said, go beyond carbon trading schemes or offset trading schemes as as it's the most developed aspect of refi in crypto so far, because carbon is easy because you can standardize it, you can build global systems, and you can build, well, mostly you can build global infrastructure and build them as low-hanging fruit and reap the benefit of being the first one, such as, or the most backed one as, for example, flow carbon. For me, regenerative financial systems are much more about creating mechanisms that generate upward spirals. And this works for me much more in the local and in the concrete than in the abstract and global level.
It's interesting to think of these systems on multiple layers sometimes, where you can have a refi product, but a fiat token economic model. And I think there's a schism in the sort of like fractal design pattern. If we're doing agent-centric technology, then we should empower agent-centric issuance of credits. We shouldn't have to require I think this is, maybe I'm getting into hot takes already, I'm sorry. But some of the requirement of our token ecosystems today is they're not actually serving the people on the ground necessarily. They're serving the validators first and the regenerative farmers second. And that's not, a fault. The validators are important. That's the security of the network. That's why it's there. Same thing in Bitcoin. All of these systems require the beneficiaries, the people that we are building for, to buy into these systems or somehow subject themselves to these systems so that they can then earn. And I think the most interesting thing about refi, and a lot of the focus here, is this composable modular aspect, that it's a toolkit to customize in your own way. And I think we're so early that we're seeing these each branch coming out and thinking, oh, this is going to solve it. And then when it doesn't, or when there's a blow up, or when Adam Newman raises more money than all of us combined, which is really kind of annoying. But I think these are all facets of a larger elephant that we're feeling. Refi is one facet and CoFi is another facet. And I would step kind of meta and say MyCoFi has been this troll of the CoFi movement. And I think CoFi works because MyCoFi proved it over 500 million years of evolution on this planet. And it's why we're all here as well. So all of these facets of this greater sort of ontology of, and making sure that exists at different layers of the system. So I love it.
All right. We're only 10 minutes in and we've gotten to mycelial finance. So that's great. All right. Next time, I want to challenge the panelists to emergently decide who's speaking next instead of going linearly down the line. Let's inject a little bit of creativity, autonomy into the panel. The next question I have is, what are you excited about? What project or idea could change everything? Where are the high leverage points? Where is the momentum? 90 seconds or less. Let's go.
Okay.
You're going first.
Yeah, because I want to take it. It emerged like this. So. I want to throw the CoFi bomb. I am very excited about CoFi, collaborative finance. I don't know if anybody here already has heard about it. Who heard about it? CoFi. Okay. Basically, it's using scientifically and systematically mutual credit theory of money and credit tooling instead of using fiat money and crypto money, which seems like the local cooperative doing mutual credit with the consumers, so nice, so wholesome, but actually is, as Ethan Bookman is trying to advocate for, we can optimize the whole global economy in a massive way if we if we use the art and science of the payment graph. So using network science to study the value flows in the economy, the existing ones, not the one that we want to exist and the one in which we want to put a token into, and then asking to the people and projects if they want to use the token to cancel out a lot of transactions, because actually you don't need to do so many transactions as today. You can identify which are the regular patterns in the economic systems and just use credit. And there are tons of credit tooling structures, let's say. I just have 90 seconds. So yeah, I think that's the real game changer, because it can be the mass adoption for crypto to go into the real economy and optimize everything that's happening with blockchain, the best of blockchain and the best of the tradition of mutual credit that is happening since centuries, if not millennia. So that's it.
Burgess.
Yeah. All right. Emergently, I'm excited about putting these various mechanisms that we start seeing popping up, putting them into practice in an experimental setting. And for me, that setting is the valley the Commons Hub is situated in. We have several challenges there. Biggest one is that the village is dying out. Biggest employer just shut down. Young people have no reason whatsoever to stay there, have no jobs, have no social tissue, and that needs regeneration or the village is over in 10 years. So for me, I'm very excited about deploying some of these mechanisms, such as gratuitous funding, mutual credit and local currencies, a clearing protocol, and mutual stakeholding, for example, in the context of our village to try and regenerate the local social tissue and economy. And then in a second step from that on, also regenerate nature around us, which has, faced the biggest wildfire of 100 years in Austria just 2 years ago, has lead poisoning of much of the soil around us, and several other challenges that must be faced in the next decade or so.
Yeah, on local money, I think one local currencies, one kind of project I think that I'm really excited about that maybe we're not ready for yet, but it's really awesome, which is like Rye, if anybody's familiar with Rye, which is like a decentralized stablecoin that's not pegged to any fiat, therefore nation state systems, which, would allow the whoever's running that monetary system to kind of underlay whatever values are their values, right? Without this like inherent critical interface that is reliant upon a nation state. And then Rye just recently kind of forked itself to create Hai, H-A-I, let's get high.com, H-A-I.com. But but Rye was always meant to be like not a global stable coin for, this is a replacement to the USD. It was never meant to be like that. It was meant to be a protocol where that any locality could deploy their own issuance of stability designed for their own purposes, unattached to input whatever collateral they want in there, set whatever monetary policy they want, and it just stabilizes itself, basically dependent on those parameters. So I think as a super micro point, but that's like in the toolkit for like local money, I think like decentralized stable coins, obviously. Flat coins have been talked about, but Rye basically is a flat coin. So, yeah.
One of the, actually, I think I want to shout out Holochain is one of the things I'm most excited about in this space, and that type of agent-centric architecture, but also the model of issuance, the agent-centric issuance. Actually, having done some work with Art Brock and Mary and Emmeline on different aspects of research, algorithm for pricing holofuel works. It takes into account productive measures of the economy and measures them against the financial measures of the economy. And you can kind of get this really interesting growth of productivity and financial input without a speculative price increase. And I think there's really interesting ways that we can combine these signals of value that we can sense socially, but we can't sense on markets, at least the markets of today, and we can create new sort of sense-making structures that can take in different inputs and impute community-agreed price that we will buy and sell these for, and create some tether to real value in the community based on whatever it is you're producing, rather than needing 500 million participants in a global network because your fiat token needs to pump, and that's the only thing that's going to get it there is shilling and scale. Of empty memetics that aren't the real local productivity. So how do we make these work on community scales? And I think there's a lot of interesting new tools coming out in these ecosystems to make that happen.
All right. Well, no one said quadratic funding, so you all fail.
I did. I'm excited about bringing QF to. It's just hard to pronounce, really. My tongue got in knots.
Radical. I heard it. Radical.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Well, I'm wondering if we could next get a spicy take. Give me an unpopular opinion. I want to taste this spicy. I want to taste the jalapeno pepper on my tongue.
Give me a spicy take that unfolds on my taste buds like a fine wine, and at the end, I want to see Moloch in my mind's eye. No pressure, but give me a spicy take. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll start. In my opinion, I don't know if it's so spicy among people here in ReFi. Maybe ReFi seriously needs more implementation, experimentation, and way less virtue signaling. Wasn't so spicy.
Everyone see Moloch in your mind's eye, but in that type, I did. Yeah. And here's next.
I say it as a true supporter of ReFi as a movement, and we are been contributing to ReFi DAO, ReFi Spring since the beginning. And we are going to ReFi Week in Portugal at the end of October. If anybody is interested to join, let me know. But I agree with Felix, and my hot take for the ReFi space is that we should recognize that 90% of the projects there have fundamental flaws in their economics model and in their political model, meaning what is the assumption behind it. And with the first, I mean that I see 90% of them being sustained by narrative and hype, and memetics was mentioned before, which is a component which is not irrelevant. It's important to be there, but if you don't have economics model that makes sense, it cannot work. And regarding the political assumptions, let's say the assumptions that carbon credits or biodiversity credits, or that compensating the damage that economic agents are doing to the environment will be something that actually works and change the system, that's naive at best, in my opinion. I never spoke about this in public because I don't want to be the salty guy. I'm a little salty now. But I was thinking about doing this, social exploitation credit, in which, corporations that exploit workers can finance union work or finance... Does it make sense? And you were like, no, it doesn't make sense. But why carbon credits make sense and social exploitation work credits doesn't? I don't know. That's my hot take.
Yeah.
Strong launch.
Mine's really short. The regenerative revolution has always been mycelial. Spicy.
I think one thing that I haven't heard talked about too much in this space is who's familiar with hypercerts? For those who don't know, and this is going to be a terrible explanation because I don't know that much about it, but it's basically like being able to place incentives in the future and then fund them now. So like we can place outcomes future, like this forest is regenerated to this level, to this state, like a future state that we desire, and then we could start funding activities that are leading up to that now, and then you get like these hypercerts for funding those, and then in the future, they're presumed to be valuable because of the actual ecological value that was accounted for. And that's really cool, but we should be really, really careful with placing such incentives so far into the future, because the system will have changed by that point. And if we place immense incentives on these future outcomes that we today see as being good, it could be a runaway incentive train where like things could end up happening that we don't actually want to at that point in the future. So we should be careful. Like Rocco's basilisk, if anybody's familiar with that, it's like the same way. It goes the other way too. If we may think we're placing good incentives now, and it may be, but so adaptivity at all scales basically is what's required.
Now I feel guilty for my hot takes. No, I wanted to,
Sure.
There is a lot of public goods primitives that are being developed now that are super cool. And I think that despite the past critics on like carbon credits or markets incentivization, I still think that a part of the economy will develop in that direction. A lot of economic agents will behave and think in that way, in that logic. So even if it's not our favorite way of changing the system, like, I don't know, building carbon credits marketplaces and infrastructure for, I think that somebody still should do it. And we should have all the spectrum of economic agencies for what regards regeneration of the planet. So also these things, we have to build them.
All right. Well, I want to invite all of y'all into the discussion from here. So we're going to do a fishbowl style, which I just learned about 20 minutes ago. But the way it works is that someone sits in a chair, and then the person who's been on the panel the longest will then take a seat in the audience. And so we're going to rotate through people from the audience up here onto the mic. And let's invite some play into it and play the infinite game together. So if someone wants to come up and take this seat, please do. And is it the rule that the person that comes up gets the mic?
If they want to, yeah. If they're ready, no.
Doing it the formal way, like they do an order of arrival.
That sounds like too structured.
Yeah.
We don't know that.
Yeah, not necessarily immediately, but they come up to talk. So yeah.
Okay.
If you compelled, sir, to speak, then I think you should speak.
Here's a mic.
I'll just since I stepped up, I'll have to speak, I guess, at first. Yeah. So, and I've never done this either, but hypercerts sound really interesting, and I think there might be a mechanism for exchanging them in the future and saying, okay, you get credit because you played the game so far, but the game, we want to change the rules to meet local conditions or time-based conditions in the future and create some sort of exchange rate. So that might be a solution to that. But what I wanted to come up for was to inject into the conversation the notion of reputation and trust and economics of that. And a question arose in my mind some time ago, trying to figure this out through introduction to Ethereum and this trustless economy. And it became clear to me fairly quickly that trust was necessary. You can't have a trustless economy. Even the Silk Road understood that. So how do you replace debt, which is this like abstract, destructive, Malachian energy and thing that it's like moving us forward in a kind of an infinite spiral of down because debt needs to be serviced, and it's almost like an exponential thing if you feed it with free energy, which is hydrocarbon based. So how do you replace debt with reputation? Can you have some sort of reputational system that encourages the growth of good reputation based on human values in a community or ecosystem?
I really liked Emmeline's, from Emmeline's talk earlier. She had like this quick diagram of like 3 layers of, I made a little drawing, I'll show you later. But the bottom layer was like very, very local, peer-to-peer, and that was like very trustful. You know, it's a very trustful network. And then at the very top is the global layer that kind of requires a bit more trustlessness because there's so much collaboration required across distance, right? And then in the middle of that, there was like a layer of DAOs, you know, so like in that middle land, I think, because like when it's really trustful, peer-to-peer, you know, we don't really need a lot. We can do a lot of things very quickly and trust each other. And then at the super high global layer, like this trustless stuff is going to help. But I think one thing that I like about that middle layer is the trustless tools like DAOs. Like it's trustless technology. You can put like we can all put our money into a trustless smart contract, and none of us have to trust each other and whatever. But what happens is, you know, shortly after that, like we could be, you know, from all the way around the world and not know each other, and that'd be fine because it's trustless. But very quickly after that, we'll all be in a DAO doing things together and building trust. So like that's what happens in that middle layer is these trust bridges from that local peer-to-peer and to the global, or at least one side of it.
Yeah, I think we've got the tools at our hands. We've got the tools. That's why I'm here. I'm so excited about it. And to feel this new energy coming back out of the last 5 years of a train wreck is great. But how do we take what you're just talking about and turn it into a system where it's kind of regenerative and it works at a distance? I mean, we could do this locally. I mean, reputation is a human thing that was designed, you know, by the mycelium to create communities. How do you turn that into a global kind of decentralized version of itself that is incentivized to, like I said, take the place of debt, servicing debt?
2 things I want to say. The first thing, I think your issue with debt is rather an issue with interest. than debt in itself. The other thing on reputation, global reputation to me doesn't make sense. Reputation is contextual. So it's not global, it's not abstract, it's concrete. It's in concrete settings that you have reputation towards someone with regards to something. So that's specific. I think that reputation for us is relevant as primitive for creating networks of place-based communities and travel and exchange between these places. So I want to get to a point in next 3 or 5 years to be able to see the reputation someone got at TDF in Portugal or Liminal Village without having to know that person, and being able to react to an application of them coming to our place based on the reputation they gained in these contexts. But these are specific contexts, and they have meaning for me as I know and trust these other projects.
Yeah, actually, I'd like that it's come up a few times already about not beating the current system at its own game, but perhaps even evolving beyond the Bucky Fuller. And I think debt is one way of creating money, and it's kind of been copied and pasted around the world. The way that central banks create money out of debt would effectively, decentralize that in some sense to private banks. 97% of that money is created by private banks. Which basically means we've allowed banks to intermediate themselves between us and our communities of trust. The fact that I have to go to a bank and ask for money to buy a house instead of coming to my network, it's really annoying for me to have to do that, because you all have to come up with the money to give me. The bank doesn't have to do that, it just creates it. That's trust, and we can create that for each other. And there have been different manifestations of this. Peer-to-peer lending popped up online. It was really interesting for a while, of course. At this kind of scale, especially on the internet, when that came up, trust, reputation was an issue. It got regulated to shit until it's basically a bank. And that's one of the choke points that they have is regulatory, even we see it in DeFi and BreFi and all of this, KYC. So I think what we're on the cusp of is a plurality of different forms of monetary issuance. And we now have new substrates and new tools for different sandbox experiments. And a lot of them are failing, and it's great learning. We've done all of this. Every economic thought has probably been experimented in some way within the past 20 years, and some of them have spectacularly exploded, and people don't learn, and they probably will continue to explode. But this is how we iterate in scientific and engineering frameworks. We build on those. We build that into our models, and then we know for next time that mutual credit issuance is a far more robust, dynamic issuance of tokens rather than fiat issuance. That's my hot take for Owaki. Most crypto tokens are fiat. They are minted at some point. Some of them are put on a liquidity bootstrapping pool or pushed out in different ways, but there are huge bags that could tank the market at any moment. And there's responsible dealing with that, but I think dynamic issuance will just allow us to move into a much more emergent and pluralistic way of issuing currencies. That we still have this debt problem, and I hope we can transition out of it, but I think it's a fundamental systemic way that we issue money, and it'll change.
Yeah, what he said. Good stuff. I think you run into two things here, one of which being what Jeff just rightfully pointed out is around creating economic plurality, right, in terms of the alternatives that we have to the traditional system. Right, so we're developing a lot of mechanisms out there that allow us to connect our resources and leverage them in new ways, but really kind of refining those mechanisms into themselves, understanding how that type of system tends to operate, and then starting to stack these things on top of one another is what enables us to move away from the single system that we're stuck in. And I like to describe this as a spectrum of money, right, where if the existing money we have is green, well, we're not getting any green. And really what we're focused on is adding colors to the palette, right? Giving us more avenues to go through from what we've got to what we want. And so then it becomes a conversation around communicating around the types of things that we're trying to do. And we need a more robust way of expressing not only what it is that we're trying to accomplish in terms of the outcomes, but also the how. Right, the methodologies that we're using, and kind of the standards we hold for ourselves, and how we treat the humans and nature, etc., there's some really interesting work that's been happening this year, developing something called the Ecological Benefits Framework. They have a website that's introducing this, canyouchangethefuture.org. It's a cool tool that's being developed to introduce typically the funder side, right, the buy side, to a more expansive way of thinking about regenerative finance, right? Breaking out of the tunnel vision on carbon and including other critical elements of a healthy planet. Specifically, there's 6, I'll just name them, right? Air, water, soil, biodiversity, equity, and carbon. So speaking through that kind of a pluralistic accounting set, right, allows us to express more about the kinds of things that we're trying to get done, and then having the menu of alternative financial mechanisms and channels that are available to us to draw on as we need, as the system continues to collapse, helps matchmake those capabilities.
It seems like we have a much richer set of capabilities to expose signals and attach them to monetary value. And how we use that is a big question.
So I kind of want to sidestep monetary conceptualizations for just a moment. So I've actually been working outside of neighborhoods on a project that uses this schema called value flows. And basically, you can define all sorts of resources, you can define agents and stuff like that. But to even go like further afield from like technological solutions, let's go back in time to like the year, say 1100 in what is now known as Peru. And we'll go to the Tawantinsuyu Empire. All you probably know this as the Inca. And so what they actually had was this really complicated system of these knots, quipu in the language. And the people that kept these knots were the quipu kamakak. And so they had this actually really intensive system where they would have multiple of these people who were essentially accountants who would be split up into this incredibly hierarchical system from like all the highest parts of the government all the way down to all the different local regions. And they would keep track of all the things that would need to be created for that empire, right? Like you needed clothing, you needed all the different kinds of foods, your beans, your corn, your quinoa, all of these different things. And they would basically have the system of being able to fulfill obligations to their neighbors, their larger scale neighbors across the entire empire. And they would record all of these obligations that these people had in the quipu. And as the obligations were met, the quipu kamakak would tie some knots and basically say, okay, you have met your obligation. So, if you step outside of, the monetary aspects of it, what are we really trying to do? We're trying to help each other survive, right? We're trying to help all of the trees around us, all of the little animals around us, all the insects that are important for pollination, and small animals that are also important for pollination to survive. So, this is probably a different way of thinking than we think of right now, because we think of, I have money, this money is what enables me to do what I want to do as an individual, but we need to shift to, well, what are our relationships with each other, and how do we reorient those and reify those to survive collectively?
Yeah, that was like the single token system comment that a lady made in Croatia was like that. Like once that unit is there to measure and count, we all just go straight to it and bypass all the other things about just basic meeting basic needs or obligations, right? Exactly. And then we get at that layer where we're just only designing that number and how to use the number and how to count the number and all these things. But to your point, we should have lots of different numbers, and they don't all need to be numbers at all, potentially. So yeah, that's kind of what I meant also earlier about we need like tense radicalism to get out of this single money box that we're in to actually get, any of the places that we're talking about getting to.
Yeah, and it's the difference between a system based on domination, right? A more masculine-oriented system where it's top-down control versus a more feminine approach to economics, and a system of, partnership. Center for Partnership Studies, it's Rihanna Eisler's organization, did some amazing work on the care economy and common metrics for measuring it across a bunch of global systems that have done that. I felt that like forever ago, so we'd love to go check in on that.
Yeah, what got me out of my chair to come up here was just feeling like the word decolonization needed to be said. And I so appreciate you bringing this in, because there's not only so much that we can learn, but also like so much internal deprogramming that needs to happen in order for us to address things at the right level. And so that's really all I wanted to say. It was just like, because it's the water that we swim in, and because it's reinforced by like, we go out in the world and like the artifacts of the way the world is right now reinforce a story about the world that gets us to enact that story, that it's a really deep process of internal introspection, and also like re-indigenizing ourselves by spending time with indigenous communities or spending time on a vision quest. I've seen like, I really think technologists in particular should go on vision quest, because there's these worlds of abstraction, and then like you go and look at the syntax of living systems and you're like, wow, we are so far from the way that living systems actually operate.
So yeah, just to talk about vision quests for a second. This can be very, very simple. Like for a lot of people, it's actually just going and sitting out all by yourself for 4 days. No water, no food, just understanding what your needs are as a human and your connection to the place, right? And so it's really simple. You don't need to go get high anywhere. But yeah, and all of those other medicines do have a place, and they do have a context and social, like cultural context in which they were used. And I think it's important to honor that.
Thank you. I will actually quote you, because you said before that we cannot wait for someone to come and save us. And I just think, and also connecting to what Scott was saying, something that we are seeing with the local nodes at ReFi DAO is that regeneration has to come from the bottom up. Like there is no one that can just come and tell you what to do. Like, oh, you need to plant trees to save your city. Because when you live in a city, you know what are the problems of that place. You are living them. You are suffering because of them. So what we see with these communities emerging now, and that we are very happy to help with funds and the knowledge we have, is that they come with problems that we didn't even think about. Like we didn't know that the problems of coffee producers in Costa Rica is that Costa Rican people don't even drink coffee from Costa Rica, because that coffee is exported, and they import coffee from Brazil, and because it's cheaper. So they end up drinking coffee that is not even local. Like you don't know that if you don't see that and if you don't talk to local people. So this is just one example of the things we're seeing, and I'm really inspired every time I have the chance to peek into these local problems and be there to support them without being the savior, the project who is going to save the world. We're just there as a support mechanism, and it's absolutely inspiring. So thanks.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. And this is something that I've been consistent in bringing to people in this space, right? Taking this technology first approach and kind of falling into those traps is like, this is not a technology problem, right? It's really a social problem. This is organizing the community and really rebuilding the social fabric of trust, which has been eroded over the course of capitalism and now into late stage capitalism and the rise of global fascism. And fascism will continue to emerge in the void, right? In the suffering and need that humans get left in, right? Unless we are more effective in organizing better systems to outpace it.
We're going to talk about toilet paper really quick.
Go for it. Please, speaking of shit.
So, I have a friend, and she's been working with this koala farm in Australia, and they've been trying to like regrow some of these trees in this forested area. And part of how they're funding this is by essentially producing toilet paper. So they'll take some of the trees and they will chop them down, and then they will ship this all the way over to China. And then China has the facilities to produce the toilet paper, which then gets shipped back to Australia. So, one of the interesting things about this is like, we all use toilet paper, right? I'm assuming. But maybe everyone needs it, but not every place is equipped to actually produce it, because it actually is a very water intensive process. Making paper can be very intensive. So, not every place is going to be equipped with all the resources to be able to do this. So yeah, this also just goes back to that problem of like, how do we organize all of our capabilities and resources and relationships in order to continue having the things that we have right now, so that we're not going out and foraging leaves, which I don't know, we could have compost toilets, right? Human manure toilets and stuff, and just use leaves instead of toilet paper. But there's options. Yeah.
Wastewater treatment is nice.
That somehow relates to sitting here, that toilet paper conversation. Okay, so just quickly, my perspective, I don't know much about crypto, coming from like 27-year-old, the system's obviously crashing, what's new, incredibly curious, and I just want to emphasize that lens right now. And then like, if there was, I don't know, I'm really interested in like, could I sign up for a membership so that I can have this like database in which there's a value system, say that, because it seems to be like a core of values that like soil, healthy water, like things that tie us together in that like church or like foundational value system, which unites. And then if I could like, I would pay for a membership to be constantly informed. So I'm just coming from that lens of like, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm seeing all the layers, but like getting really grounded and being like, just a girl. But that's the energy of like, I can also imagine like boots on the ground work. Like if you need, like I had two questions. Either one, someone like me, like how could I insert my energy, and boots on the ground, like physically going to different communities in which have those shared values and like doing personal research. And like, if those fit the criteria and value systems, that would like go on the list of like soil, water, etc., the things that we collectively agree there. And then I would come back with research, like a bumblebee, like, pollinating, or two. And then also we'd be like, somebody would come into that community to educate them on Ethereum and crypto, etc., as an alternative approach to enhance and empower their system. Or second to that, start it from zero. If I myself was like in the position where I'd be like, I really want to start a cooperative. Now I know who to access, or like who to call upon for X, Y, and Z. Yeah, so I just wanted some perspective for what advice you would give just a girl trying to see this, and like where to start from this point forward.
I first thank you. I feel the spirit of where you're coming from, and it's really inspiring and beautiful. And I've been on a track recently of like feeling how so many organized religions have not achieved a more beautiful world. And despite all of the like beautiful aspects of so many different faith traditions that I've studied, it's like, where is that sense of participation, that sense of like, there's a quote from the Bible that by thy fruits they shall know thee. Like, where is that spirit of like a civic religion, where the way that we practice our faith is by showing up and caring for each other and planting community gardens together and getting our hands in the soil together. And I do think that there's a need to have more of a sense of radical solidarity with people who see the world differently from us. That there's something unifying about water and soil that goes beyond, is someone a conservative or a progressive? It's like, if you can actually have your hands in the soil together, some of those labels and distinctions become less relevant. And that's what I want to see more of. And I know that we're in a time where like polarizations are at their peak and there's so much reason to fear and hate. But my sense is that this kind of civic religion of like being in community together because of a sense of mutual care and responsibility is a way to kind of heal those divides.
Yeah, I think in terms of like just getting involved and like understanding where you can like, I guess, dip your toes in. There are some people that I've known like in the regenerative space that are trying to create like a directory of people that are involved in that stuff, but none of those projects have really taken off, or they haven't been finished rather. So they're just really small databases right now. But yeah, I don't know. I just looking at your community, like where can you find a place to get involved? Just talk to people. And PDX DAO, yes.
PDX DAO.
That's right. That's the local community here. Yeah. So yeah, that would be a great place to start.
I have some ideas too. So I live part-time on a farm. It's about an hour and a half from here, and that's what we're trying to do over there, to actually grow food and take care of the soil and the forest and butcher animals ourselves so we can see where the food is coming from and hold events and community and basically develop relationships and webs of relationships through actually doing stuff together, like cutting vegetables and making sauerkraut and processing food. So that's the part I'm interested in. I saw that there's other people here who are involved in land projects, so I want to connect to all of you. Like you're doing the thing in Austria, and then Tony's doing something in France, right? So I'm curious about how, because I'm a crypto skeptic. I want to see how it transforms into real stuff rather than just conceptual things. And since this was going to be about regenerative finance, I'm also curious about how we can fund things like this space. Like I offered the space for a year, so there's nobody who's been paying rent to using it for the last year. But the year is over and we don't have any funding for next year, so I'm not sure what's going to happen with the experiment. And also, I'm trying to do the same thing at the farm, where at the farm we have Airbnb and like events that do some funding, but it would be a lot cooler if we could fund it with people who want to come and stay for a month and like actually experience what it's like to develop a relationship with the land and like have an integration with the land and actually support us in continuing to show people what it's like to touch grass and like grow food and do things like that. So I'm curious who wants to do stuff like that and use all these conceptual frameworks and fun stuff and all the spiritual stuff, the animism and the new religion. You Benjamin, you're talking about how to integrate all the levels, the spiritual level, the food level, everything. So yeah. Okay.
So does anyone want to help organize something on Gitcoin as like a grant for this space?
You submit the water on the ground.
There it is. Submission to the QF round that we just started yesterday. Great.
So please share the links of the stuff you're doing in the group so we can all see them.
Yeah, in the Telegram group.
Yep.
Separate channel for the QF rounds on the Telegram now, and I'll stick with it all the link for in there so that you guys can submit drafts. And then when contributions open, we'll also post another newsletter with that. But keep an eye on Telegram to see the QF drafts.
It's all about the Telegram.
Very nice discussion. Benjamin's point actually made me think about medium-large hot take of mine regarding regeneration and changing the system. So we, as a movement, we are starting, or we are promoting and encouraging going into places, regenerating land, creating local communities, all these kind of things, which is amazing. Sometimes, though, I look like at the big picture, and I see these efforts are very small impact, which is okay because like they're not only regenerating land, but they're also activating community, plugging into global networks and creating movements. That's super cool. I just think that sometimes we tend to limit our attention to these contexts in which are like privileged in a technical people, because they can, in a technical sense, meaning that they can do it. Privileged people that decide, okay, we go outside of the city and I go to this regenerative place and this is the biggest impact I can have. And maybe it is if you can do it, but billions of people in the world, at least 2 billion people in the world lives in huge cities and they cannot live. So they have to live in the city. And we have to conceive strategies that include these millions and millions of people that live in the city, in very shitty cities, and they cannot all take their families and go into traditional factory, unfortunately, because there is no space. So regeneration should also consider these people in their non-regenerative context at all. And also being aware that even if we engage other 10 million regions and we take a million eco-village and we create them and we generate this land, still for system change in the appropriate time frame, we have to politically mobilize the majority of the people on the planet and enact the political changes which will stop and then alter the course of environmental destruction. So yeah, just to make sense that like it's cool what we are doing, it's very nice, and if you could, you should definitely go into a regenerative village and live there and do stuff. But also there's a huge amount of struggle which is going on in the cities, and yeah, that's a different thing, and that's very relevant, and I think we are a bit overlooking it.
So yeah, I want to build on that a little bit and then also respond to kind of the question of like, what do I do? How do I get involved? It got me thinking of just like how fundamentally important for us as builders, building these new systems, how incredibly important it is to make them accessible. And that's accessibility not just in like you being able to use an app or having access to internet, all of those things, you know, and the design is really important, but also down to like the fundamental, how can people who are interested in getting plugged in and having their voices heard and have something to contribute, how can we make that as easy as possible? And that's from like my experience of kind of just dabbling around in just DAOs out there, right? Just poking into Discords and seeing what's going on and how can I contribute. And I run into a lot of, I'm like, how do I do something? And like, I've just run into a wall of like trying to get people to explain to me how I even contribute to it. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to go on to the next thing. And that's not great. That's not great for them. I believe that's not great to have people that are wanting to come and contribute and not be able to do that. And then also zooming all the way out to like on a structural level, right? There's systems all the way up that exclude, that are, you know, often difficult to see, difficult to address, that are underlying all of this. And like addressing all of those and looking at all of those is just like so important to get more voices in the room, and to get the people involved and get people involved that can contribute. So it's something, just want to plant that seed of something as builders and designers, like we should be thinking about the ways to do that.
Thank you. I wanted to build on this planting meme and plant a little seed of hope. Julio was talking about cities, and I met this incredible human at Climate Week in New York, Flavia Bellegarda. She's a sort of a climate activist turned lawyer. Didn't really feel at home being a lawyer, but still kind of used that to gather a group of 1,000 climate lawyers in Brazil to sort of start collectivizing together. And then she was telling me she recently got asked to lead a project in Sao Paulo, the largest city in Brazil, involving the stewardship of the 3 largest green spaces along this like main avenue through this largest city in Brazil. And I think she's, quite possibly, made for this. She's really called into it, and she's got this playground to activate on this real connection. These are beautiful green spaces. They've got like native trees that, were there originally in sort of like the tiniest little outposts in this 10-kilometer square radius. But it's a little seed of hope that I found in the context of Brazil, which is the G20 chairmanship next. And so we'll be involved in sort of maybe setting the agenda for some of these new economic frameworks. They've got the sort of COP30 in 2025, and so there's a lot of potential around that. I see legal hackers, as a legal hackers community. I got connected to her through this community that I was involved in helping to nurture of lawyers, technologists, and policymakers in over 200 cities around the world, just like a totally decentralized chapter-based network, and gather, the leaders gather every year. There's a few gatherers around the world, legal hackers, they're called. Yeah. And again, it's just one of many, I think, of these sort of mycelial communities that we know of where there can be these intersections of this kind of energy in person that then spread, like, through that cosmolocal capacity, and to think that they're Portland to Sao Paulo and back again, and all across. It's all connecting up, and you see the quickening happening. So, just wanted to drop that little seed of hope.
I'm here representing different projects, so that's why I came on stage again. And I heard what you were saying, Ryan. So I'm speaking on behalf also of the founder of Urbanica, Humberto, that couldn't be here today. Much love, thank you. So talking about hearing multiple voices and having multiple people in the room and hearing them and hearing the communities and really giving the voice to people who might not be part of this ecosystem, because this ecosystem is quite exclusive still. We have communities around the world that don't have access to internet, and if they do, they maybe don't have a fast laptop, they cannot open Discord, they don't know about Twitter, they don't speak English. So with Urbanica is the Commons Academy, let's call it like this, and it gives the tools to neighborhood to coordinate and take decisions and really act and take action in their neighborhood. So what we're going to do, hopefully soon, also thanks to Gitcoin and the Quadratic funding, is start a 2-year journey throughout Latin America in a bus, bringing the course to local communities there live and really giving them the chance to be heard and be part of this ecosystem. In Spanish, I'm learning Portuguese, Brazilian from Brazil just for that, and because I love learning new languages. But what we hope to do is visit 40 cities and having more people, more representation in this room and make it less exclusive and bring it to people. So for whoever would like to follow this journey, which will be long and it will be very interesting, it's Urbanica on X. Hopefully we're going to use also some other platforms like the neighborhood platform. I'm very interested because I think it connects so well with Urbanica's mission. So yeah, just wanted to share that. Thank you for sparking the idea. Thank you so much.
Just trying to synthesize some of the conversations that have been floating around. We've talked about what can we actually do here as individuals, how do we take action, and the limitations that crypto has so far in producing real results for more regenerative local monies. Hearkening to Howard Silverman's talk earlier this morning about with the dynamical systems approach to commodity systems, with the conclusion that we needed to prioritize local currencies, or they needed to prioritize the producers instead of the consumers. One question that I want to pose is, what sort of systems architecture for those currencies, and what should we use, and what kind of mechanisms should we employ in those to guarantee that producers are benefited over consumers?
Okay, so I'm just going to represent value flows for just a moment. There's not a whole lot of technology around it right now. There is a team that was working on some stuff around this carbon farm network. I think it's based out of New York, out of the Hudson Valley area. And like what they're trying to do is basically, they're actually more engaged in like engaging designers of like clothing to use local fibers. But in order to do that, they have to engage with all of the farmers in the region that produce, alpaca fiber and like sheep fiber, like the wool and all of that stuff. So they're really building up this whole like network view of everything that's involved, including all of the supply that the farmers would have. And you can actually see this is how the alpaca is sheared. This is how it's all washed and milled and then finally turned into the actual yarn that you want to use. So you can see this is all the work that goes into it. This is all the transportation that goes into it. And this is, essentially the full, value chain of how it gets to you. And you could essentially look at that and compensate everybody that was involved in that network in a way that would hopefully work out for everybody. But I don't know, one of the things that I think about in terms of our existing systems is also if we did charge the right amount for something to actually benefit the producer, would we be able to afford it currently, even food? So that's a big question that I have.
Yeah, sounds like that response, that architecture that we need for local currencies is a deep understanding of local context, the local production, the logistics, those networks.
Something that's really nice about bringing in local context is that it has value in different ways, in different sort of spheres. So when you've sort of contributed in a local context, that recognition will have a probably a greater value in that specific local context when it's seen as part of, for example, a hypercert or some other mechanism of legibility that you have done a certain kind of contribution and there's different ways of having that legibility, whether it's in knots or sort of social context. It's part of how people introduce each other in the Maori context. They speak of the mana, and that's essentially, their power. And I'm gonna get this sort of in a reductionist way, but the essence of it is what you care for and what you take responsibility for, and that's how you sort of meet each other and gain each other's respect when you first sort of enter into any kind of interaction, whether it's transactional or not. And I think this is one of the spaces for opening up these conversations around what a local, maybe more sacred economy can look like when we're thinking about that kind of relationality as the foremost thing, rather than the transactionality. And the exchange of some physical good is sort of almost a part of the sort of wider communal becoming with, that isn't something that is accounted for in the same way as rather, the relational energy of the interaction that is actually the thing that you account for, that you really read as part of what a local sacred economy can look like. And then, obviously at the Cosmo local sort of interface, you can have these boundaries that are, again, legible to these outside, maybe more single token financial frameworks. But the idea of what that boundary can do in terms of protecting, I think, is this key question that we've not yet quite been able to solve, which has allowed this external universal solvent to essentially come into localities and buy up property and create gentrification and just do all sorts of things with even politics and buying, through corruption and various other means, like the kinds of regulations that enable them to do what is beneficial to them in that wider system. And so thinking about those boundaries, what we can do at the policy level, what we can do in our terms of private law, private agreement, private socio sort of political norms around what it means to sort of interact locally versus, allow something from this Cosmo sort of space to come in. I think designing those boundaries, designing these APIs for these exclosures, I mentioned yesterday this term that we're just still playing with.
That's cool. Answering to the question, I was thinking how to, in terms of onboarding for your organization. In the traditional model, like for example the startups model, you have a small team which is like very close, because like you have these 4 people maybe, and they have to do the plan for the whole year, but you cannot really engage with a networks of contributors, because it's like the work is very structured. On the other way, what we are trying to do is to be a very open and very loose network of projects in which there are a lot of entry points for anybody to contribute in many different ways. And I think that that's a very good metrics of the success of your organization, the degree and the vastness of your openness to the outside world. Yeah, meaning that a lot of different categories of people can contribute in a lot of different ways. That should be the goal.
I heard your question of how can I incorporate some practices to understand like this range of like this technology and this kind of structure into like this human value-based emotional spiritual realm that creates this system that seems so cold, and put it to use into that human form. And how do you navigate those worlds? And I come from more of the technical world, and I've built, these systems and tokenomics, et cetera, et cetera. I can say a few heuristics for the people on my side of that spectrum. If you can create a system for the most vulnerable in your community, then that's going to work for everybody. And one of the cornerstones of doing that is a framework of consent. So if you look at a framework of consent, that means you have clear communication, you have a kind of a negotiation, you have a negotiation about power too, because usually there's power imbalances in human relationships. And consent is really that framework that you need for these systems to work. And if you think about like what that means and those pieces that you need in order for that to work, then you can turn those into a system that's more mechanistic. So I think that's a good heuristic for designers, people on doing the technical, abstract building of a system that's supposed to serve people.
Yeah, I think it's especially true if you consider that we have the vast majority of the technology that we need already. There is not like a lack of organizational tools. We just have to bring the majority of the people on the layers progressively. So yeah, I think there's too much focus in general on creating the new thing instead of the biggest effort, which is taking all the things that we have and make it really distributed for everybody. Going to have lunch.
All right, we just heard from attendees of the Portland PDX DAO General Forum on Ethereum Localism that were part of the Fishbowl panel that I hosted on regenerative financial systems. I'm excited about them because of the diversity of viewpoints about Regen Web3, what it is doing and how it is going. Thanks again for listening to the GreenPilled Network podcast. Again, we are building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers, bringing positive sum digital systems to the world. If you value our work, please make an offering to our algorithmic overlords and subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps the algorithms promote GreenPill and promote the Regen Web3 movement to a broader swath. And we want to build this movement so that we can regenerate the world. Thank you so much for listening. Peace and love. I will see you next time.